Okay, the next section is experimenting with the characteristics of watercolor that is transparent and opaque. Transparent is see-through, and opaque is not see-through, so no light or the paper would not come through here. Here with transparent, the paper would come through the color. So transparent, it says pick a color and dilute it with water enough to create a transparent layer of color. You should be able to see the whiteness of the paper through the color layer. So I'm going to take a color, and you can use really any color with this. Some of your pigments are more transparent than others. Like yellow is going to be more see-through than blue. So I'm going to take a pigment, and my brush is going to be pretty wet, and you can do this in your palette. So I'm just adding quite a bit of water to it, and that's how you dilute it so that it's see-through. Then I'm going to paint, wash it onto my paper. If it's still not quite see-through enough, then you can add water to it as you go, like you're doing your washes. Okay, so that is transparent. So now I want to do opaque. I'm going to pick a color and use a lot of pigment and very little water and paint a section. You should not be able to see the white of the paper. So I'm going to use the same color that I just chose, and what you'll find with this one is sometimes you'll get paint loaded on your brush and you'll think that your brush is pretty dry and it's pretty thick paint, and sometimes your brush has more water in it than you think. So then you might have to dab your brush off on your paper towel. And you might need to reload your brush with pigment. So here we go. My brush is definitely getting dry as I go down this section. I'm going to go ahead and fill that in. Okay, there we have it, opaque. So transparent, opaque. The next one, I'm going to paint a stripe of each color, and then when the paint is dry, I'm going to paint other stripes of color in the opposite direction. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to have my brush isn't going to be very wet because I want a pretty good layer of pigment. I'm going to paint a stripe of this color. Then I'm going to rinse my brush out. Get the next color. Paint a stripe of it. And paint a stripe of the next color. I'm going to keep going with that all across this square. Now that I have a stripe of every color, I'm going to let this dry completely. It needs to be thoroughly dry, and then I'll come back in and paint a stripe of the same colors going the opposite direction. And we're looking to see where the colors intersect to determine which colors are more transparent than other colors. So I'm just finishing up painting the stripes of colors the opposite direction. So I'm loading my brush with pigment, and I'm going to drag it across the top. And remember, this exercise is for you to figure out which paint pigments are more opaque and which ones are more transparent. So when you look at this, you can see that the yellow pretty much gets covered up every time. It's probably the most transparent color. And then the last one will be the yellow again. Okay, then we can barely see that yellow over anything. And then, so you can take a look and just compare which colors are more opaque and which colors are more transparent. Okay, the next section is staining. And with this one, you're going to paint a section, and while the paint is still wet, try to lift out the color by using a clean, damp brush or a piece of tissue. So this one's pretty easy. I'm just going to paint a section, a color. Just fill the whole thing in. And I'm going to rinse my brush out and get it clean. Then I'm going to dab it on my paper towel so that it takes out some of the paint, and then I'm going to lift out some of that paint with my brush. And the other way to do that is with a clean, damp paper towel. You can see I can lift some of the paint away. This only works while this paint is still wet. Okay, next square is number 11, tinting. We'll pre-wet a section and place a drop of a different color in each corner. This is really similar to the one that we did earlier for mixing, but this time you're going to notice the tinting strength of various colors. Also notice how some colors push another color aside while some mix together. So let's go ahead and pre-wet it. Remember to use clean water and pre-wet your section. Then I'm going to get some paint wet, and this time you can use more than 2 colors. It doesn't just have to be 2, because we're going to see which pigments are stronger than others. I better do this quickly before everything just puddles to the bottom. Ooh, look at that. Immediately you can see that the red overtook all the green there. Okay, so now I'm going to do what I did before where I push it around and tint it. So you can see some just come right over and take charge and are a lot stronger than others. That red is going all over the place, and some just will push the others out of the way. So that is the tinting strength of that. Next and last one on the characteristics page is glazes, and the first thing you're going to do is paint a section and let it dry thoroughly. So I've painted my section right here. I'm going to let it dry, and while I do that, I actually encourage you to go on and work on some other other techniques, and then come back, and when that one's dry, do the glazing. Okay, so my glazing section right here that I'm going to glaze has dried, and now I'm going to take another color and go over the top of it to see if we can change the color. And we want to use a transparent paint, so I'm going to take my pigment and add water to it to make it transparent. And then I'm only going to paint over half of my color because I want to see how it changes. And you can see that this time it really picked up a lot of that paint and actually lightened it. Sometimes if it's dry enough it won't do that so much. But I'm going to let it dry again, and then I'll paint 1 or 2 more layers of that, and you'll be able to see how the color changes from where I didn't paint it to where I've glazed it. Okay, so I just finished applying the third and final coat on my glaze section, and remember that I only did half of the painted section. I covered that with a transparent color, and I let it dry thoroughly in between each coat of glaze. So you can see that we can make quite a different color from what you started with by just doing light transparent layers. One thing also to note is that as you pull the color over, you really want to leave your paintbrush fairly flat so that you're not taking color off, you're just adding color on, and so you can kind of just float the paint over the top by leaving your paintbrush laying fairly flat.